B, a U, and a T. No. Okay, I'll talk about it later. Okay. All right, quiet on the set.
There we go. Wow. So I'm not sure if we're going to finish the Megillah tonight. There are
There was a question.
we're up to Perek Ches, but there are two different ways that we can do this. We can try for Ches, Tes, and Yud tonight and kind of do a marathon, or we should go with Ches and then do Tes and Yud tomorrow night, or possibly Purim night. Maybe it wouldn't be a terrible time to do that. But anyway, we can talk about that on the chat and figure out what you guys want to do. But without any further ado,
Go for it.
Perek Ches. So this is, of course, this year our learning is dedicated in the memory of Joanne Tepler, that Neshama should have an Aliyah. We just experienced kind of the apex, the denouement of the Megillah, where Esther goes in front of Achashverosh and Haman, and it's at the party. And as we mentioned, all this tension is finally being released from 10 years, and Achashverosh realizes that Haman has never been his best friend. Haman has really been stunking him since forever, and Haman was the reason that his first wife died, and Haman was coming after his second wife, and Haman's really a power-hungry individual, and that's why he's in his house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that's why he wants to wear his jammies, and that's why, etc., etc., etc. So that is what we've been experiencing with Haman, and now Haman is going to be hanged on the very tree that he put out for Mordechai the Jew. And as we said, it's very, very significant that he wasn't merely going to kill Mordechai, but rather he was going to hang him on a 50 cubit gallows, which is about 100 feet tall, and that's because he's an enemy of the state. If this is like some kind of a petty squabble between courtiers like that, he could never lower himself in that way. But since we're hanging Mordechai from as an enemy of the state, meaning we're putting him all up, Yishmu V'Yiro, as we mentioned, like sticking the heads on the pikes as you would come in through the drawbridge, it was that sort of thing. And then Haman himself gets hanged on the very, very same thing. And now we begin chapter 8. By Yom Hahu, on that day, Nasana Melech HaChashverosh Esther HaMalka Esbeis Haman Sorer HaYehudim. On that day, King Achashverosh gave Esther, the queen, the house of Haman, the hater of Jews. Now, this is so interesting. The house of Haman, the hater of Jews, meaning we know he was the hater of Jews. What do you mean he's the house of Haman, the hater of Jews? We know who he is. He's Hitler. You don't have to say Hitler, the hater of Jews. You say Hitler, we know exactly what you mean. There's only one of those. Yeah, we know who you mean. So the Malbim here is fascinating, really, really fascinating. And see, listen to this. When the king kills you for being a mored b'malchus, which means a rebellion against the king. So if the king tells you to do something or tells you not to do something, you disobey the king, you're dead meat. And when you're dead meat, your assets are forfeit to the king. He gets your money. Now, historically, there is at least one very, very evil king who was no chelik d'olam haba, who took advantage of this because he wanted a certain vineyard of a relative of his, actually, and he asked him to sell it to him. His name was Navos, and the king was Achav, and Navos wouldn't sell him the vineyard, so he set him up so that he'd be able to kill him as a morid b'malchus, so that he could take his vineyard, which is a terrible, terrible story. But in this case, it's a beautiful and glorious story. So Malbim explains it's not merely that Achashverosh is killing Haman, and then he's taking the money and handing it to Esther as a gift, but rather he's saying Haman is dying because he was a morid b'malkah. He rebelled against the queen, and therefore all of his assets go to her. So on that very day, King Achashverosh gives Esther Hamalka as base Haman Surah Yehudim, Haman, the hater of Jews. What does the hater of Jews have to do with anything? That's the reason that it was considered a merida in the Malka, a rebellion against the queen. And therefore she gets his stuff. Mordechai Balifnei Hamelech, also remember that's very significant because Haman was the richest human being on the planet Earth. So, Mordechai Balifnei Hamelech ki hikida Esther mahula, and Mordechai came before the king because Esther had told him what he was to her. Now, this you understand can mean one of two things. if you go according to the Medrash Chazal that Esther was married to Mordechai, then this means that Esther told Achashverosh that, and she came clean to him. Either way, when I say either way, because for example, the Ibn Ezra holds that this means that he was her uncle, like straight up, and there's no funny business whatsoever. It's like, this is my uncle and my only family, But whatever your understanding of the dynamics of the story were, if you listen to the words, it's not just she brought Mordechai before the king and said he was her uncle, or that she said he's her husband, but rather mahula, what he is to her. She told the king what he means to her, meaning it's much more than just, oh, he's my uncle, or oh, he's my husband, but rather there's all of that depth and relationship comes to the king, and she puts it flat out in front of Achashverosh.
She stayed with King Achashverosh.
She stays with Achashverosh. That's not in question.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no way she would
say that she was married to Mordechai.
He's going to go, this is awkward.
Well, so if Ariel's asking a very, very, you have to ask that question, right? You can't read the Megillah and not ask that question. How could Esther tell Achashverosh that she was previously married to Mordechai and that he stole her essentially from Mordechai and not have any ramifications? So if again, that's why I told you before, there are different ways of seeing that. Perhaps she was not married, but if you say that she was married and you say that she did let that information go, that means that she understands the king doesn't care about that. The king is fine with whatever your former life was. That was your former life. Ever since you've been here, you're with me, and now we're on the same page about this. But
doesn't it go to the very beginning though, of that she was supposed to be a virgin?
So the virgin thing is the Gemara already picks up on that. The intent originally was to only bring virgins, but because the courtiers got carried away, they're like, no, why should we limit this? Right? We see no reason to limit ourselves and be so, what would the word be? So backwards thinking as to only bring virgins to the king. Why shouldn't we broaden our minds a little bit and bring Eve and the other ones? Right? So it can go, and again, it can go either way with Esther that way, because Esther, perhaps if she wasn't married to Mordechai, then we would assume she was a virgin. Whereas if she was married to Mordechai, then we know indubitably that she was not. So you can have either one of those shots. Vayasar Hamelech pasuk beis in Perek Ches. Vayasar Hamelech es tavato asher he'evir meHaman. This is great. And the king removes his ring that he had taken back from Haman, Vayitnala Mordechai, and he hands it to Mordechai. Vatasem Esteres Mordechai al Beis Haman, and Esther puts Mordechai in charge of the house of Haman. Now, this is out of order because you said in the last sentence that the king gave Esther the house of Haman, and now you're telling me in sentence 2 that Esther gave the house to Mordechai. So you should have said that in the end of sentence 1. And then in sentence 2, said that the king gave his signet ring to Mordechai. But what this means is Esther did not put Mordechai in charge of the house of Haman until the king gave him his ring. Meaning, until the king showed his favor to Mordechai by, oh yes, I hear what he is to you. I'm told what the story is. Now I'm totally caught up. And now I'm giving you the ring that I gave to the second in command of the whole country. Now that we're cool with that, Esther sees it would not be a diss to the king who had given her the household to turn around and put Mordechai in charge of it, which he in fact does. And when we say house of Haman, it does not mean the real estate upon which he lived in Miami Beach. So it's like, oh, he lived on Michigan Avenue between 48. No. It means the holdings of. The holdings of. And you remember, we said this is the Gemara makes this diuk. The Gemara makes the diuk in the chapter of, I think it was chapter 5, when Haman comes in front of all of his loved ones. Haman comes in front of all of his loved ones and he tells them all of his riches. He gives them his money. And the Gemara is like, what do you mean he showed them all the money? And he says, V'chol zeh einenu shoveh li, and all this is not worth anything to me. All this, the Gemara understands from saying all this, is that he's referring to a specific thing, meaning he had a ledger right in front of him. And he's like, these are my holdings. Boom. And like, it looks like, the third Book of Mormon, right? It's like, so, and he's got all of his stuff. It means his holdings, the house of Lannister, the house of Stark, the house of Haman. And that goes to Esther, and she puts Mordechai in charge of that house. Vatosef Esther. And Esther continues. Vatdaber lifnei hamelech. And she speaks before the king, Batipol lifnei raglav, and she falls down in front of his feet. Batif, and she cries. Batischanenlo, and she begs him. Lehavir esraas Haman ha'agagi, to take away the evil of Haman the Agagite, and his thoughts that he thought upon the Jews. Now, this pasuk is telling you different things. It's telling you different things. She doesn't just say that she wants to take away the action that Haman perpetrated, meaning he sent letters to everybody saying two things. Let's do a brief recap of what the letters are because the letter game is very confusing. Haman sent two sets of letters. The first set of letters went only to the officials, the chief of police, the mayor, the secretary of the interior, and the National Defense League. And then the other set of letters went to everybody who got, knocked up in the middle of the square on the tree and posted. The letters that went only to the important people were secret letters saying we're going to kill all the Jews. All the Jews are fair game. It's hunting season, open season, purge on the Jews. The open letters said, those were the secret letters. The open letters said, everyone be ready for July 4th. Be locked and loaded. Stand by. Now, when you tell all the people to be ready and locked and loaded, stand by, you got to have your target practice, you got to have your firing lanes ready, you got to make sure that you're stocked on the ammo and you got rations just in case. Who knows if Walmart might be closed, we don't know how this is going to go. But you understand that people are winking to each other because we know who we're going to be getting, right? We know who we're going to be getting. If you're an anti-Semite, you know how we hear this all the time now? They call it dog whistling.
Yeah.
Call it dog whistling. Now, dog whistling is a dangerous concept because you can accuse people really whenever you want about dog whistling. Say, oh, you really meant something nefarious. You're hinting that you're an anti-Semite. You're hinting you're a racist. You're hinting that you're anti-China. Whatever it happens to be in terms of your dog whistling. That doesn't mean it's not true. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Right? The fact that it could be abused to shut people down if you don't like what they have to say doesn't mean that people aren't dog whistling. Both of those things are true. If you are an anti-Semite in the time of Haman, and you know exactly who Haman is because he's a proud member of the Aryan League and he hates Jews, and you know that he's the one who's sending out all of these letters in the name of the king saying to be ready and locked and loaded for July 4th, you know it's going to be killing the Jews. So even if you don't know it, you suspect it and you're prepared for it. Now Esther says, there's two things that I want from you, Your Majesty. The first is to undo the damage that has happened that Haman put into effect. And the second thing is to get rid of machshavto, his thought. Because even if you are somehow able to take away the national imperative, and we're going to take away all those letters, it doesn't matter. He's already put into effect so many different things that are going to have bad ramifications on Jews. You have to take away his thought as well. It's not enough to just undo the letters. You have to undo all the things that have been set in motion because of what Haman has done. Because the damage of Haman is very deep, very, very deep. For example, there could be a national mood. Where even though, according to the letter of the law, you're not allowed to harm Jews. It would be the furthest thing in the world for anybody to think that you can harm Jews. And yet, you can have a climate where, whether it's comedians or politicians or business leaders or members of the press, there can be a certain political climate where there are some things that are totally okay and acceptable to say and to push. Totally acceptable and okay to say and to push. And those things are very, very dangerous. They're very dangerous. And that's what Esther is asking him to undo. Yes?
What I don't understand is when the king decided to kill the national mascot, Haman,
Yeah.
what is the public supposed to think? I mean, I know you said that
Oh,
he's
beautiful. So yeah, hold tight for that. Hold tight. You're going to see. We're going to see. So again, Esther's saying to Achashverosh, she also has to undo the thought of Haman. And the king again extends the golden scepter. Remember, the golden scepter is a symbol of national might, and he extends it to Esther. And Esther gets up and stands before the king, which means that her arguments have been accepted. I'm going to let you talk to me. I'm going to let you make these requests to me. Vatomer, and she says, Imal hamelech tov. If it pleases the king. V'imatza sichein lefanav. And if I found favor in his eyes. V'chasher hadavar lifnei hamelech. And if the idea is good before the king, meaning it's not enough that you think I'm pretty. Don't do this because you think I'm pretty. But also kasher hadavar lifnei hamelech. If this idea is good to you and you like it, v'tova ani be'enav. And if I am good in his eyes, that's not the same thing as chen be'enav. Chen be'enav, listen, I'm a pretty girl, he likes me. If you like me, then do something for me. But it's not just that, it's more than that. If tova ani be'enav, if I am good in your eyes, if you think that what I bring to the table and what I bring to this country in terms of the symbol, the national symbol, in terms of what I bring to you, if that's good, Yikasev lahashivas hasfarim. He should write to bring back the letters. Machsheves Haman ben Hamdasa ha'agagi. The plan, the thought of Haman, son of Hamdata the Agagite, Asher Kosav la'abedes ha'Yehudim Asher v'chol medinos ha'melech, that he wrote to totally eradicate all the Jews in all the countries of the king. Ki echacha uchal v'ra'isi v'ra'a asher yinsai esami. How am I supposed to stand by and see that in the evil that's going to befall my people? How can I stand by and see my family just be wiped out? And again, it's like, there's this iconic picture during the Holocaust of this couple. This couple, it's a Jewish couple, and they're walking in some busy, I don't know if it's Times Square or Fifth Avenue, some busy New York thing, and they're wearing those sandwich cards. Mm-hmm. And on this guy's sandwich card, it says, help, they're going to kill me. I'm going to be deported, and the Germans are going to put me into a concentration camp, and they're going to kill me. So it says on his placard. And his wife, I'm sure you could Google this, and his wife is next to him, also with the sandwich card, saying, help, my husband is going to be murdered. And they're walking around New York. They're walking around New York, and you have to imagine millions of people saw this at the time. What do people do? Nothing. But this guy knew what was going to happen to him if he was deported, and even if it wasn't him specifically, but his family, he knows what's happening to the family in Europe. Esther says to Achashverosh, okay, great, we killed Haman. That's wonderful. Haman is dead. But don't you understand? There's 12 million Jews scattered around your kingdom, and the letters have already gone out. And if you don't stop those letters and bring them home, millions of Jews will die. How can I stand by and watch that? I understand you killed Haman. I appreciate that. He was an evil guy and you killed him. But we're all going to die. It's not going to stop that. The fact that he's dead is not going to stop the fact that this is going to happen. Listen to Achashverosh's response. So Achashverosh is back to Esther the queen and Mordechai the Jew, right? Their titles now. Esther the queen, Mordechai the Jew. He tells Esther the queen and Mordechai the Jew, and by the way, up until this point, he was not addressing Mordechai. He was only addressing Esther. And all of a sudden, his response is to address Mordechai as well. And he says, Hine beis Haman nasati le'Esther. Behold, the house of Haman I gave to Esther. Ve'oso talu ala eitz. And they hanged him on a tree. Al asher shalach yado ba'Yehudim. Because he raised his hand against the Jews. Meaning, well, yeah, I know that already, Your Majesty. Are you trying to say that you've done enough? Is that the point? Are you trying to say that the fact that you hanged Haman, I should be happy and go home? No, that can't be, because the king knows already that the king knows that those letters have already gone out. So the fact that you hang Haman doesn't help me. So why does he bring it up? So listen to the next sentence, and then I think it's going to make sense. So he says, I've already given the house of Haman to Esther and hanged him on a tree for trying to kill the Jews. Ve'atem, so you guys, kisvu ala Yehudim katov be'einechem, write to the Jews or about the Jews, whatever you want, b'shem hamelach, in the name of the king, v'chismu b'tabas hamelach, and sign it with the ring of the king. Ki ksav asher nechtav b'shem hamelach v'nachtom b'tabas hamelach, ein lahashiv. Because a note that goes out with the stamp of the king can never, ever be returned. So here's what Achashverosh is saying to Esther. Esther's request was quick. Send the fastest stealth bombers you have, the fastest you got, and bring back those letters before they're opened. And Ahasuerus says, listen, honey child, they can never come back. Not the fastest thing, not the slowest thing, not the strongest thing, not people with an army. Those letters are stamped with the ring of the king. They can never, ever, ever be
He's referring
destroyed.
to the first set.
The first set of letters.
Right.
There's nothing you could do about the first set of letters. But listen, you can write anything you want in a second set of letters. And what are the second set of letters going to be read in? Through what context? Through a context of Haman, who was the second most powerful man in the world, just got hanged on a tree as an enemy of the state for messing with Jews. Therefore, Ahasuerus says, I just gave the house of Haman to the queen because he tried to mess with the Jews, which is why, by the way, he's addressing Esther and Mordecai the Jew in this case. It's not only Esther. I'm addressing Esther because you're the one who's requesting this of me, and I'm addressing Mordecai because this whole issue that he was hanged as an enemy is because of what he tried to do with the Jews. So the first step is everyone's going to know, like, tell me something. How long do you think it's going to take for the information to get around the kingdom that the second in command was hanged? Pretty quick. Everybody's going to know that. So everyone's going to know that Haman was killed for messing with the Jews. So now write whatever you want, and it'll be read in the context of this just having happened right now. And then everybody, the power will be on your side. So I can't undo those letters. All those anti-Semites that are going to try to kill Jews, that can never be put back. That genie can't be put back in the toothpaste. But
he is, though. I mean, not put back in it, but he is overriding it with this new letter. So it's the same.
So Ariel says he's overriding the order in the second letter. And the truth is, he's not.
Okay.
All he's doing in the second letter is
disregard the first letter.
No, he can't disregard the first letter.
So
It means that the first letter that I sent was true and the second letter that I sent was true. What was the first letter? The first letter is all the enemies of the Jews who want can go and kill the Jews on July 4th.
right.
What's the second letter that I'm going to send? The Jews can defend themselves against the people that hate them on July 4th. Meaning, when I wrote, how is this going to be seen now? Listen to the brilliance of this. People have been, I'm sure you're aware that if you look at the FBI hate crime statistics, the number one group who are targeted in this country, which is probably the least anti-Semitic country in the world. Don't say Israel, because Israel is the most anti-Semitic country in the world. But this, right? This is like, I don't know if Israel was worse than Europe, but anyway, certainly America is not a very anti-Semitic country. And Jews are far and away on the receiving end of all the hate crime. Like there is no close second. And I mean, in numbers and in proportion, it would be actually like infinitely more, but in actual numbers, like in New York, just unbelievable. Okay, fine. Well, how many people do you think hate Jews, but won't hit a Jew in the head with a rock on a subway platform? How many people hate Jews? A lot. Tons. Okay. Whatever the statistics are, the people who want to but won't because they'll go to jail, because it's not worth my job, because that, right? Okay. If you give them carte blanche from the government and say, I'm totally behind you, we want to kill all the Jews, how many of those people do you think are going to crawl out of the woodwork in glee? All of them.
Okay.
Which means that first letters went out telling people that they should be ready, and everybody is winking and, secret handshakes. We know what's coming, and they're all crawling out of the woodwork. And all of a sudden you get a second letter. And the second letter says, by the way, the Jews can do the same things to the ones who hate you. Well, now how are the people going to see the first letter? The first letter was a trick to get us to stick our heads out of the hole. The first letter was true. We have carte blanche to do the purge against the Jews on July 4th. And we're totally excited and all the momentum's on our side. All of a sudden, there's a second letter that says, oh yeah, by the way, it's a two-way street. The first letters are not undone. They stand, but now they're viewed completely differently.
But just from a binary perspective, the first letter says kill him.
Yes. First letter says kill him.
It goes to that very, to the elite
yes, to the elite people, know to kill them. The other ones, wink, wink,
right,
wink.
Okay, but you're telling them to kill them. First of all, I imagine they're going to realize that some Jews are going to defend themselves, but they don't need a letter to do it. What do they got to lose? I'm going to defend myself.
Oh, there's a word that's going to answer your question in the next verse.
Right.
The hikahel, for that reason. Yeah. Okay, this will answer.
Well,
So
wouldn't they be confused?
yes, they would be confused, but the letters are ambiguous and they're purposefully ambiguous because once you live in a society where nothing that's ever written can be undone, then how do you change your mind when you need to? And the answer is you play word games. And you say, yes, this is what we said, but it's involved in the law. So I could take the Supreme Court law and I could say that abortion is legal, and I could take the Supreme Court law and say that abortion is not legal. We're looking at the same document. We're looking at exactly the same document. Well, that's true, but how do you interpret the 8th and the 12th and the 14th? So the ambiguity is a major piece of what happens. But either way, he says to her, there's nothing that can be undone about the other ones. So now listen to this pasuk. And they called to the scribes of the king at that moment in the 3rd month, which is Sivan, on the 23rd day of the month. And they wrote all that Mordechai said, El HaYehudim, to the Jews, and to the governors and the satraps, and all the heads of state from Hodu to Kush, 127 countries. Every single country and every single people in their language, and to the Jews in their language. And the Jews in Morocco got theirs, and the Jews in Chicago got theirs, and these got it in Yiddish, and these got it in Ladino, and these got it in Russian, and these got it in Spanish, and everybody got it. And the rabbis all of a sudden were getting all these letters from the king. It was written in the name of King Achashverosh, and it was signed with the signet of the king. This is also one of my favorite sentences in the Megillah because it does not mean anything. I'm going to read it again. It was written and signed in the name of the king, and these letters were sent biyad haratzim basusim, on the ones who were runners in horses, rochvei harechesh ho'achashtoranim b'nei haramachim, who would ride the rechesh of Achashtaron, the children of the Ramachim. And you're like, what's an Achashtaronim b'nei Ramachim? That's a very good question. And the answer is we don't know. When I say we, I mean Jews don't know. It's not in our corpus of understanding. The Gemara doesn't know. The Gemara says we don't know, but that doesn't make any sense because why would it be? You're telling me like the type of horse? You're telling me a type of horse that they were running and it doesn't seem very, very significant, right? Oh, and they were Clydesdales. I'm like, well, I don't know what a Clydesdale is because had I not seen a Budweiser commercial, I never would have heard of it. So why is it in the Megillah? And the answer, of course, I really should have began the class with saying this would be much better. But here's the point. That you don't have to know what it means to know exactly what it means. Meaning there was something super high-end, incredible technology that they had at the time that these horses were blazingly fast. They were the fastest piece of movable technology on the planet Earth at the time. They were called Rochvei Harechesh or Achashtoranim b'nei Haramachim. And you're like, I don't know what kind of horse that refers to. The answer is, it doesn't matter. You get the point. It means spaceship. It means F-117. That's what it means. It means you have to have an appreciation for the fact that it was sent in such a way that this was considered to be hypercharged speed. But now the Malbim Massacres, I don't understand. Why did they wait until the 23rd day of Sivan to send out the letters? If the whole issue is speed, and why would speed be the issue anyway? You have until July 4th. You're in Sivan. You have Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei. You have tons of time. So why is speed of the essence, number one? And number two, if speed is of the essence, then why do you wait until Sivan, which is a month after you hang Haman? Why do you wait a month to do this? And he answers brilliantly. Listen to this. It's crazy. Remember, we said you're about to send out second letters that do not contradict the first letters, but they totally spit in their face. Right. Completely. They change the meaning of the first letters because essentially you're taking the first letters from a directive of kill the Jew to a place of we fooled you and you've been set up. That's what you will have done. Therefore, says the Malbim, the people who delivered the letters were specifically the same people who delivered the first letters, because otherwise they thought that maybe the people who received the letters won't believe them. Since immediately after you just got these other letters, and now all of a sudden I'm getting letters that change the meaning of the first letters, we're going to make sure that the people who deliver those letters are exactly the same ones who gave the first one, that there should be no thought of forgery. And therefore, says the Malbim, they had to wait until they got back. So they had to wait until they got back. Remember, the first ones went fast because Haman had to get them out before anybody knew what was going on. So he sent them on fast people, but he didn't send them on the Rochvei Rechesh Ha'achash Doranim B'nei Arab Achim, because that would be a waste of money. Do you have any idea what rocket fuel costs? He just sent them on fast horses and got them out quickly. Now we wait until they come back. They come back on the 23rd of Sivan, and immediately they turn around, put them on the rocket ships, and send the same guys back to the same post boxes so that everybody will know that it's not a forgery. And what did they say? Asher Nasan HaMelech LaYehudim Asher B'chol Ir V'ir. That the king has given the Jews in every single city, lehikahel v'la'amod al nafsham, to gather, lehikahel, to gather, v'la'amod al nafsham, and to stand up for their lives. Lahashmid v'laharog ula'abed, to destroy, to kill, and to make gone, as kol chel am umedina hatzarimosam tavenashim. Any army and any people in any country who bother them, women and children included, ushlalam lavos, and to take their booty.
Now, did this letter go just to the VIP?
Everyone.
Okay, so the non-VIP, he gets this letter.
Yeah.
He's gonna say, well, I was never told to kill him. I mean, isn't there a bit of a
So
confusion?
it depends. Either the VIPs wouldn't open it until the very end, in which case it wouldn't have been weird for them, or they were able to open it up and just not share the information.
No, I'm talking, the VIP is fine, I get it. They got a letter, they opened it, they kept their mouth shut, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. Okay, no, I'm talking about the Amcha.
The regular guy.
Yeah, did
Regular
they
guy-
get that letter too?
Yes, regular
But
guy
that
got the
letter,
letter.
but the first letter to the regular guy was
Was
just,
be
hey, just
ready.
be ready.
The first letter
Now
was
they're
be ready.
getting, hey, the Jews can defend themselves against you. I mean, it's a bit of a, okay, I mean.
Oh, so let's understand, right? What's the magic word here? The magic word, because you mentioned before, I don't understand. You think if the Jews were going to die, they weren't going to try to defend themselves? Like they wouldn't be standing there with their machete and their shotgun,
Right.
12 gauge.
Right.
The pasuk takes that into account when it says lehi kahel, to gather. You see, you read all the time about the Haganah in Israel, right?
Right.
You read about these essentially farmers that defended their settlements, right, against people who had, I'm guessing, killed people before. And these guys were potato farmers or, accountants. And how did they win? And the answer is, the answer is God, and the answer is a lot of things. But one thing that's important is they prepared and they trained, and they said people are going to be attacking us. We know they're going to be attacking us, and therefore, well, where are they going to come? They're going to come from here. They're going to come from the road. So we're going to set up checkpoints in the road. We're going to be intelligent about it.
Right.
Well, the idea that you can gather together to plan for these things makes an enormous difference.
And that was legal.
And that was legal. Not only was it legal, but it was explicitly encouraged that Jews should get together and open up Krav Maga clubs. And Jews should get together and open up weapon clubs. And Jews should get together and these are things that if the government cracks down on you and makes it illegal and says, first of all, we're taking your firearms, can't have any weapons. Second of all, we're making sure it's illegal to have people coming together, right? That's how Hitler does it. He starts with the Nuremberg laws. You have to start by pushing out the other, right? Shifting, and you show where the public sentiment is. And then from there, to go from there to beating people in the street is not a far cry. And to go from there to Kristallnacht is not a far cry. And to move from Kristallnacht to the ovens is not a far cry. But to move from the first step to the ovens, it seems like it's very, very far. So what Achashverosh does, or Mordechai does, and Achashverosh allows him to do, is flip the script in such a way that it seems that everything that had always happened was for this. This was always the intention. The intention was to get the anti-Semites to expose themselves so that I can come with a quick follow-up saying, get them, guys, there they are. Well, now that happens, Paschegen Haksav, the openness of the letter, to give an edict of the king to every single country, openness. The Jews should look forward to this day to take revenge from their enemies. Understand, revenge from the enemies is an even higher level. You're not just saying that you can stand if someone's coming to try to kill you, that you can defend yourself. I'm going a step further. I'm saying you can take revenge from your enemies, meaning assuming you know who your enemies are, the king condones that you go and burn their house down. Haratzim, rochvei harechesh ha'achashranim, the runners of these special supercharged Teslas, yatzu mivohalim udechufim b'dvar hamelech, left, again, mivohal means harried, crazy, meaning rushed. They rushed Haman the second night when he was covered in dew and all that stuff. They rushed him. They rushed him out, udechufim, and pushed b'dvar hamelech with the command of the king. It has to go now. And the edict was given in the capital. And now Mordechai comes out from in front of the king. You understand the contrast between this and just a little while ago when Mordechai was taken around a few days ago, just a small, short time ago, that Mordechai was driven around the entire town by Haman. And it says after he's taken in the clothing of the king, on the horse of the king, with the second in command of the entire country, of the whole world, the empire, walking him around everywhere. Thus shall be done to the man the king wants to honor. And what happens when he's finished? When he's finished with the tour, walking him around Disney World, what does he do? Mordechai goes back to Shar HaMelech, and he goes right back to his sackcloth. He goes right back to the garbage pail. But now that the king has sent out the second letters, now let's see what Mordechai's wearing. Mordechai exited from in front of the king, Bilvush Malchus, Techeles Vachor, in royal garments of Techeles and Chor. We had Chor, Techeles is that bluish greenish dye that we have for the tzitzis, and Chor we had in the beginning of the Megillah, Chor Karpas, it was Techeles, right? These are all the original things that we had showing off the wealth of Achashverosh is now being used as the grandeur of Mordechai. Ba'teres Zahav Gedolah, and he's got this big golden hat, the Sachrich boots ve'argaman, and he has a nice, really cool, coat of beautiful materials. And the whole city was so happy. Be like, what? The whole city loved Jews? Like that? Why does the whole city love Jews? Who did the whole city hate more than anybody else? The non-Jews. They hated Haman. He was the worst. He's the second in command of the king. We all know that the king wants to have a national mascot. We all know that the king wants to have some guy that's going to run the day-to-day because he sees himself as too holy and separated from that, and he doesn't want to slumber with us. And who did he choose? A guy that makes everybody go down and lick his boots. A guy that we always had to worry all the time that if we look at him the wrong way, he's an egomaniacal person. He's going to kill me, throw me off a cliff, and make my family disappear. And all of a sudden, who's second in command? Morty. Now, do I love Jews? Frankly, I got to be honest with you. I don't love Jews. They're not my favorite people in the world. But here's the thing. I know the trains are going to run on time, and it might even be pretty good for the economy. And he's not going to be killing people, this Mordechai guy. I've heard about him. Nobody has to bow to him. People are happy.
I'm just curious, though, from a point of chronology.
Yeah.
Right, where it says Mordechai left the king's presence, blah, blah, blah. Is there a time gap here, or is it?
I would imagine that it's talking right after they sent the.
Okay, so here's the thing. Isn't that like celebrating a bit too early? I mean, yeah, you dispatched everything.
Oh, what a great question. RL says, isn't that celebrating a little bit too early? Which is what I was trying to allude to when I said it before. He didn't. When he was taken around by Haman, he did not celebrate. Now he does step into that role. He feels like at this point. Yeah, you're right. You're making a good point. Why it hasn't been finished yet? The battle hasn't happened.
You don't know what.
That's an interesting point. I think that in this case, it's very important that he shows his power and his influence, because that's going to directly influence the Jews' ability to be successful in the war. To whatever extent the second in command of the king is seen as respected and beloved and powerful, that has a massive effect on the people who say, whose team am I going to be on? Who am I going to support? I'm going to tell the police force with a wink, which side of the street they should be, training the water cannons on. That's what's going to happen, right? So I think that, but it's a very, very good question. Now, what's another thing that's really interesting is it says that in the Torah in Parshas Vayigash, when Yosef when Yosef comes out to his brothers, right? They didn't know who it was, and he finally comes out to his brothers, says, I'm Yosef, is my father still alive? And it says, L'chulam nasan la'ish chalifos malos. To each one of his brothers, he gave them a change of clothing, and to Binyamin, he gave chamisha, very good. Chamisha chalifos malos. He gave him 5 changes of clothing. And we asked a very, very simple question. The Gemara asked this question. The Gemara asked the question, but the answer the Gemara gives is rather cryptic. The Gemara says, I don't understand. Like, Yosef got through all this problem in the first place because he had a fancy cloak. And now that he comes out to his brothers 30 years later and everything, like he's going to start this whole thing over by making them jealous of the little brother with the fancy coat. Like, it's crazy. And the Gemara says, that's a good question. And the Gemara answers, well, he was giving it to Binyamin to be merames to him, to hint at him that he was going to have a very, very famous descendant that was going to exit a king in 5 super special elements of clothing. And that's why he gives him, it's a remez, it's a hint. I'm giving you 5 sets of clothing because you're going to have a descendant in 1,000 years. That's Mordechai. Mordechai is a descendant of Benjamin. And therefore, Yosef gives Benjamin 5 chalifot smalot to tell him that he's going to have a descendant in 1,000 years who's going to have 5 articles of clothing.
He picked up on that.
What the heck kind of an answer is that? How does that answer the question? You asked me why he's making his brother jealous, and your answer is because in 1,000 years there's going to be another little Yidale who's going to come from Binyamin. He's going to have 5 clothes. You're telling me that Binyamin wouldn't have had 5 articles of clothing if not for the fact that Yosef gave Binyamin the 5.
Although, now that you bring it up, since we're talking about it, I was thinking he's testing his brothers. How far have you come?
So you can.
Have you checked your
ego? Yeah, you could say that. You could say that. I don't think that's accurate because for other reasons. But I don't want to get into like the Vayigash business. But the question is what the Gemara means, right? We're asking not so much on what the Chumash means. What's the Gemara mean when it says that? So let's consider for a moment. Let's consider for a moment the dichotomy of Yosef and the dichotomy of Mordechai. Yosef is a Jew who is second in command to the Pharaoh, who is essentially in charge of feeding their known world at the time. Who's Mordechai in this role? It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same role. He's Mishnah Lamelech HaChashverosh, and he's literally fulfilling the role that his uncle did, essentially. So now, but it's not only that. In both cases, it's an issue of looking out for the Jews in a time of galut. We're not talking about people who are going to be, like his descendant. Binyamin's going to have a descendant. Shaul is going to be king over the Jewish people. But he's going to be king in Eretz Yisrael. He's not going to be king in Babylonia. He's not going to be king in Persia. He's going to be king in Eretz Yisrael. But Yosef was second to the king in Galut, in the exile in Egypt. And Mordechai was second to the king in the Galut in Persia, before the Jews were able to go into Eretz Yisrael. So they have that in common as well. They're fulfilling the same role. Now, why it's 5 is very significant, because otherwise I wouldn't have to tell you that. The fact that it's 5 and the fact that it's these 5, I would imagine that each one of these begadim is probably hinting to a different layer of royal authority or influence. I don't know what they achieve. I don't know what they refer to, but just as an interesting thought experiment, that's how I would begin thinking about it. Why is it 5 and why is it these 5 and how are they different from each other? Right? Because you could have made the point that Yosef, just without belaboring the point, you could have made the point that Yosef and Mordechai fill a similar role without having 5 and without naming what they were. So I would think that this is just like the beginning of that idea, but it's a good place, you can start thinking about that on Purim if you want. Pasuk Tesvav, La Yehudim haisa ora v'simcha v'sason v'yikar. And the Jews had light and happiness and rejoicing and yikar, majesty, honor. Well, so of course the Gemara says, Ora zu Torah, Simcha zu Yantif, Sason zu Mila, Yikar zu Tefillin, which means, I know the pasuk says that the Jews had light and happiness and rejoicing and majesty, but really it means, when it says light, it means Torah, and when it says happiness, it means holidays, and when it says rejoicing, it means Brit Milah, when it says Yikar, it means majesty. Well, I mean, why not just say that, right? You could, right? So when the Gemara says what each one refers to, it's a little bit strange. But what that means is the Torah here is telling you how the Jews felt about these particular mitzvot that they had. meaning there was a shift in the way that they related to these mitzvahs that they already had before, but because of what had happened to them now in the geopolitical sense, they all of a sudden relate to these ideas very, very differently. So of course, again, you're going to have to do a similar exercise to what we have to begin doing with the five clothing, to see why are these the things specifically and why they're in this order and why these are the words. But just to think about it in a certain way, Ora means Torah, the Gemara say, and not because it rhymes, but rather because it lights. Yes, Ora means enlightenment. That's what the Torah is. So instead of now, you can say, well, what do you mean? Of course, Torah is light. What do you mean? Of course, Torah is light. Go over to the kids that are forced to sit in a class learning Torah and ask them if Torah is enlightening or not. They're going to tell you it's a subject. It's like chemistry and it stinks. And I hate tests. You tell me the fact that people learn Torah means that it's enlightening. What are you talking about? There are plenty of people who are reading Torah and it's not enlightening. But when Torah is a light to you, it's a very different kind of Torah that you're learning. This simcha and happiness. It's as simple as Yantiv, as it says, you're supposed to be happy in your holidays. You'd be like, well, we're always happy in our holidays because we have really, really yummy food. I had delicious picanha, and we have wonderful kugel, and the wine's delicious. And if it's not Pesach, we got amazing scotch. And if it is Pesach, we have amazing wine and brandy. And but 1 second. You can sit around on Yantiv. And you could be like, oh my God, it's a 3-day Yantiv. Are you kidding me? Like at a certain point, you even get sick of corned beef. It's like, how much steak can I eat? And it starts becoming a drag. But now, because of what had happened and because of the miracle that Hashem had done for them, not in an open way, but we'll talk more about that later. All of a sudden, Yantiv becomes a different thing, becomes a time of happiness. I understand my place in the universe better. I understand that I'm moving through a cyclical cycle. And then the holidays are very, very joyous for me because it's not something that I have to do and it's not a restrictive thing, but rather it's a way for me to tap into deep, deep existential simcha. Sason is bris milah and yikar is tefillin. I'm not going to talk about either of those two things right now because I don't understand them well enough. And in every single country and every single city, it's a uniform language, just the opposite of what it had said before by Haman Hitler. And in every single place where the edict of the king reached, there was happiness and rejoicing of the Jews, parties and holidays. And many of the other people, the regular people, were pretending to be Jewish because the fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Now, this is like, look, you have to understand, the Megillah is a book of Galus. That's what it is. It's really, if you think about it, it's the book of Galus, because all of the other books of the Tanakh, maybe with the exception kind of Ezra and Nehemiah, which talk about a return to Eretz Yisrael, they happen in Eretz Yisrael. And this is God telling the Jews, if you're not careful, I'm going to kick you out. The Megillah is what happens to the Jews. It's the story of us in the diaspora, right? It's the story of the diaspora. Well.
It's interesting. They don't mention. I mean, I guess it's implied or hinted at, but not one guy decided to take a shot. Yeah, I know.
What do you mean not one guy tried to take a shot?
I know the Jews can defend themselves.
Oh, they did. We'll get there in the next chapter. 100%. 100%. Absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, because you're all in. You have to. Yeah. Okay. They did. So in Gullus, it means that the lessons that you find in the Megillah are going to be timeless lessons that are going to play out in your generation, regardless of when you live. And it's really interesting because this is one of those themes. Who's a Jew? Who's a Jew? You're like, what do you mean, who's a Jew? You don't think who's a Jew is an important issue today? I mean, for like, if you want to get political for the state of Israel, it's a massively important thing. Whether or not you can get married is dependent upon if it doesn't say Yehudi on your what do you call it? No, not your passport. Your Tuzah Zehut. It's like your ID card. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to Cyprus to get married, right? So who's a Jew is a major, major issue. And if you ask the Orthodox, they have one idea about it. And if you ask the Reform, they have a different idea about it. And you say, well, that must be like a new thing that we have arguments in who's a Jew. And the answer is, what are you talking about? The fourth parak of Maseches Kiddushin, because again, it's all about marriage, right? When you're talking about who's a Jew, what you're really saying is who can marry a Jew. That's really the question. So this discussion really comes up in Maseches Kiddushin. In the 4th chapter, it's called Asara Yuchsin. It's called 10 Yuchsin. Yuchsin comes from the word Yichus. 10 different types of people with Yichus came back to Israel from Babylonia. So again, perhaps not so ironically, it's talking about these people who returned with Ezra and Nehemiah and Mordechai. And it says, and it talks over there about people like Hutim, Shomronim. There are people who even at the time say we're Jewish, and Jews like, I don't really know if you're Jewish or not. There have been controversies and major social issues about who is a Jew for a very long time. And it's just that the faces change a little bit and the stories change a little bit. But the concept that there will be people who will claim Judaism when you do not agree is a fundamental reality of our people. And it's right there in the Megillah, and that the reason that they were doing that and showing themselves as Jewish is because it was politically expedient, and they were afraid of what the Jews might do, because all of a sudden people get fearful, like, oh, these people are on the ascendant, maybe they're going to try to trample all over me. I better, put on a yarmulke. But of course, that's not what we're into at all, because we don't want to go around trampling on people, number one. And number two, you can't convert to Judaism that way, and all sorts of unfortunate arguments ensue. But in any event, that brings our chapter 8 to a close. And please stay tuned on the chat to learn when our final coup de grace chapters 9 and 10 of the Megillah. It's coming up in sometime in the next 72 hours. Con la ayuda de Dios. And then I will take your question in 1 second. Peace and love.
Thank you.
Thank you.